In 1997, Lily Monroe was the kind of woman everyone in town knew. She was graceful, educated, and carried a kind of warmth that made people trust her instantly. She taught 5th grade at the local school and lived a modest life with her husband, Daniel Shaw, in a quiet Colorado neighborhood. Their home sat near the woods, tucked away in a place where crime was rare and secrets rarely survived. When she vanished one October evening, the entire town froze in disbelief. It wasn't just the mystery of her disappearance. It was who she was. Someone like Lily didn't just disappear. Not here. Daniel reported her missing the next morning. He told police she had gone for an evening walk and never came back. He said he assumed she might have stayed at a friend's house after an argument they had. But when hours passed and there was no call, no message, and no sign of her anywhere, he began to worry. The police took the case seriously. They searched the nearby woods, called in dogs, and spoke with neighbors. Flyers were posted. The local paper ran her story on the front page, and the community joined search parties. But after 3 days, there were still no leads. Then things started to shift. The investigators began looking closer at Daniel. There were marks on his arms that he claimed were from trimming tree branches, but they looked like scratches. The bedroom looked too clean, unnaturally clean, according to forensics. A broken lamp had been found in the trash bin outside, and one of the neighbors reported hearing loud arguing coming from their home the night Lily went missing. Another neighbor remembered seeing Daniel's car parked at an unusual angle near the woods behind their property, late into the night. The most damning evidence came when investigators found traces of blood in the trunk of Daniel's car. Forensics identified it as a partial match to Lily. It was not definitive, but enough to raise alarms. Further digging led to the discovery of a few pieces of Lily's jewelry buried in a shallow hole in the backyard. Daniel claimed he had no idea how they got there. He looked shocked, confused, even scared. But to law enforcement, it looked like guilt. The media turned the case into a spectacle. "Husband kills beloved teacher" became a running headline. Talk shows discussed the mystery endlessly. With no body and no clear motive, the case was built entirely on circumstantial evidence, but it was strong enough. In court, prosecutors argued that Daniel lost control during an argument and killed Lily, then staged the disappearance. His defense attorney tried to push the theory that Lily had run away, maybe to escape a marriage that looked happy on the outside but wasn't. But there was no proof of that. No bus tickets, no witnesses, no signs of a planned departure. The jury deliberated for just 2 days. In 1999, Daniel Shaw was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. He sat silently as the sentence was read, his hands trembling. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed his face. He looked like a man drained of all life. And somewhere deep in the Colorado woods, they said, lay the remains of Lily Monroe buried in a place only he knew. But there was no body, no final goodbye, no closure. Just a conviction, a town that moved on, and a man who claimed he was innocent. His voice would soon be drowned out by time, lost behind prison walls, and forgotten by nearly everyone. Except Lily. Daniel Shaw entered prison as a broken man. He wasn't just imprisoned by walls and gates. He was trapped in the nightmare of being punished for something he claimed he didn't do. The cold concrete of his cell was nothing compared to the weight of injustice pressing on his shoulders. For the first few months, he kept to himself, barely speaking. He replayed every moment before Lily disappeared, searching for something, anything that could explain why his life had been turned upside down. But there were no answers, only silence. He spent his days in the prison library, reading legal books, trying to understand how circumstantial evidence could outweigh the absence of a body. He wrote letter after letter to lawyers, innocence projects, and journalists, begging someone to look into his case. Most never responded. A few said they were sorry but couldn't help. Over time, the letters stopped. So did his hope. Inside, Daniel kept a low profile. He worked in the prison kitchen, washed dishes, and followed every rule. Other inmates stayed away. His story had circulated. Some believed him. Most didn't. The label of wife killer followed him everywhere, unshakable and poisonous. He avoided trouble, avoided fights, and avoided anyone who wanted to drag him deeper into the system. Years passed. His parents visited for a while, until their health began to decline. His mother cried during every visit, always asking if there was something he hadn't told the police. He always answered the same way, with a soft no and eyes that wouldn't meet hers. After she passed away, his father came once or twice more, then stopped altogether. Eventually, Daniel received a letter from a cousin saying his father had died too. He wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. He marked time. Through routines. Breakfast at 6 a.m., work from 7 to 2, dinner at 5, lights out at 10, repeat. The seasons changed. The guards changed, but Daniel's life remained stuck. He heard of new technologies being introduced outside cell phones that could do everything. Computers people carried in their pockets, cars that ran on electricity. The world was moving fast, but inside the prison, time had a different rhythm. Slow, heavy, still. Some nights were worse than others. Nights when sleep didn't come and thoughts came instead. Thoughts of Lily. Was she really gone? Did she suffer? Why hadn't they found her body? These questions looped endlessly. And behind all of them, the quiet fear that maybe, just maybe, the world was right and he was wrong. Maybe he had blacked out. Maybe something had happened that night that he couldn't remember. But every time he chased that thought, it led nowhere. He could feel it in his bones. He didn't kill her. By his 15th year inside, Daniel stopped writing letters. He no longer believed anyone was listening. He became one of those men who shuffled through the halls unnoticed, neither dangerous nor particularly interesting. He lived in the shadows of the prison, not hated, not liked, just existing. His hair turned gray. Wrinkles formed around his eyes. He aged quietly, a life wasting away in slow motion. In his 22nd year, the prison warden called him into the office. Daniel sat down, expecting bad news. Instead, he was told that due to good behavior and changes in sentencing laws, he was being released 5 years early. He nodded without emotion. There was no joy, no anger, just a numb acceptance. He had gone in at 32. He was now 54. He had missed birthdays, holidays, funerals, and the entire digital revolution. The world he once knew no longer existed. He walked out of the prison gates with a brown paper bag containing his few possessions and a check for $75. There was no one waiting for him. No friends, no family. Just the sound of the wind and the realization that freedom didn't feel like freedom at all. It felt like exile. He had been punished for a crime he swore he never committed. And now he was out alone, carrying the weight of a truth no one had ever believed. Daniel Shaw drifted quietly through his new life. After being released from prison, he settled in a small Arizona town where no one knew his name or his past. He found a job at a hardware store, kept to himself, and lived in a one-room apartment above a laundromat. He didn't talk to his neighbors, didn't own a phone, and never brought up his history. For him, every conversation was a risk. Even the smallest question could lead to the truth, that he had served 22 years for murdering his wife. A wife he still wasn't sure was really dead. Each day followed the same dull rhythm. Wake up at sunrise, drink instant coffee, go to work, come home, read, sleep, repeat. He existed in the background, unseen and unheard, which suited him just fine. But even with all the silence and distance, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished, that there was still a piece of the puzzle missing. The doubt never left. In 2020, Daniel was invited to a job interview in Los Angeles. The position wasn't special, just warehouse work, but it paid better than the hardware store. For the first time in years, he felt a small flicker of possibility. He packed a small bag, boarded a Greyhound bus, and began the long ride west. The bus snaked through deserts, suburbs, and cities, until it finally arrived at the noisy, sunlit streets of Los Angeles. After the interview, Daniel had hours to spare before the return trip. He wandered around the city, blending into crowds, watching families, listening to the rush of life. He stopped at a street cafe to rest, sipping on a bottle of water. Across the road, he noticed a woman standing near a toy store with two small children. Something about her made him pause. Her face turned slightly in the sunlight, and his heart skipped. The woman laughed and reached down to fix the little girl's hair. That laugh had pulled something out of the deepest corners of his memory. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. The way she moved, the tilt of her head, the dimple on her right cheek, it couldn't be. But it was it was Lily. She looked older, more mature, her hair a bit shorter and streaked with gray, but Daniel knew what he saw. His brain resisted it. It had been over 2 decades. He had accepted her death. He had gone to prison for it. But now, standing across the street, she was alive, laughing, with a family. Daniel's body froze. He wanted to run to her, to shout her name, but something stopped him. What would he say? What would she do? Would she scream? Deny it? Call the police? Instead, he stood motionless, watching from the shadows as she and the children walked into a nearby shop. A man soon joined them, tall, well-dressed, with a wedding ring on his hand. Lily took his arm casually, like a wife would. The children looked comfortable, like they knew him as their father. Daniel took a few steps forward, then stopped. He pulled out an old notepad he used for budgeting and wrote down the van's license plate as they drove away. The plate was from Utah. Back in his motel room that night, Daniel sat on the bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, unable to make sense of what had happened. Had she faked her death? Had she set him up? The pieces didn't fit until they did. The blood evidence, the buried jewelry, the missing body, the way everything pointed to him but never truly confirmed the crime. It had never made sense. But now it did. Lily hadn't died. She had disappeared on purpose, and Daniel had spent 22 years in a cage while she built a new life, pretending to be someone else. Daniel knew what he had seen. The woman across the street wasn't a look-alike or a haunting memory. She was Lily. Alive, smiling, and living a new life in Utah. The weight of that truth settled over him like a heavy fog. Everything he had endured, the trial, the prison sentence, the years of silence, was suddenly lit by a single terrifying possibility. He had been set up. The next day, Daniel used the van's license plate number to hire a private investigator. It cost him nearly all the money he had left, but he didn't care. He wanted answers more than anything else. The investigator worked quickly. Within 2 weeks, he had a name: Lavra Michaels, a woman living in Salt Lake City with her husband and 2 children. She had no public records before 1998, no school transcripts, no employment history, no family listed. It was as if she had been born the year after Lily disappeared. Daniel stared at the photos the investigator had taken. Lavra Michaels was Lily Monroe. The same eyes, the same smile, the same scar above her eyebrow from a bicycle accident when she was 13. There was no doubt. The new name, the new family, the new identity, it was all part of a carefully planned escape. The investigator dug deeper. He found that Lavra had applied for a legal name change in Nevada in early 1998, citing reasons of personal safety. A friend had co-signed her paperwork. That same friend, when tracked down, had moved to another country and left no trail. There were no medical records, no social security information before the change. Everything had been wiped clean, as if Lily had walked out of her old life and stepped into a new one, Without a second glance, Daniel gathered all the evidence: photographs, documents, public records, and the newly retested DNA report. He contacted an attorney who had worked on wrongful conviction cases before. The man was skeptical at first, but the moment he saw the photos and read the investigator's report, his tone changed. He agreed to take the case. They filed a motion for a full re-examination of Daniel's conviction. The motion included proof that the blood found in the car trunk back in 1997 had never been conclusively identified as Lily's. The methods used at the time were outdated, and recent testing revealed it belonged to an unidentified female, not definitively Lily. The jewelry found in the backyard had no fingerprints, no DNA, just assumptions. News spread fast. Media outlets picked up the story. Man imprisoned for wife's murder sees her alive in Utah. It sparked outrage and confusion. Interviews, podcasts, and talk shows dissected every detail of the case. How could someone be convicted without a body? How could she have escaped the system for so long? Eventually, authorities in Utah located Lavra Michaels. She was brought in for questioning. After several hours, she broke down. She confessed that she had staged her disappearance with the help of a friend. She had grown tired of her marriage and claimed it had been emotionally suffocating. Rather than seeking a divorce, she chose to vanish. She had cut her hand and used her own blood to stage a scene in Daniel's car. She buried her jewelry in the backyard and slipped away, knowing that without a body, a conviction would be difficult. But the police had moved fast, and the evidence had pointed in the wrong direction. She said she had watched the trial from afar. She thought Daniel would be acquitted. She didn't expect him to go to prison. By the time he was sentenced, it was too late to come forward. She had already built a new life and couldn't bring herself to destroy it. Daniel listened to the news in silence. He wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep inside, he had always suspected the truth was darker than anyone realized. But hearing her confession didn't bring peace. It brought a deeper kind of pain, the kind that came not from betrayal, but from knowing that someone had watched him suffer and stayed silent. Daniel Shaw's conviction was officially overturned. In early 2022, a judge declared the case a miscarriage of justice and ordered his record cleared. The courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and legal observers. Daniel sat quietly as the judge read the decision, his hands clasped in his lap. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. After so many years behind bars, emotions felt distant, buried under layers of numbness. When the gavel finally came down, it marked the end of one chapter. But not the end of the story. Lily Monroe, now legally known as Lavra Michaels, faced legal consequences. She was charged with fraud, obstruction of justice, and providing false information during a criminal investigation. But the statute of limitations had run out on the most serious charges. After weeks of negotiation and public scrutiny, she accepted a plea deal. She would pay a fine and serve probation. Her confession would remain on public record, but she would not spend a single day behind bars. The outcome enraged many who had followed Daniel's case. People demanded a harsher punishment, but the legal system offered no path forward. Lavra returned to her home in Utah. Her husband stayed with her. Her children, now old enough to understand, were shielded from the press. She disappeared from the headlines just as quietly as she had once disappeared from her old life. Daniel was awarded a financial settlement from the state for wrongful imprisonment. The amount was substantial, but no sum could restore what he had lost. He had entered prison at 32 and came out at 54. He had missed the prime of his life. He had missed birthdays, funerals, world events, and the simple daily joys of freedom. Most of all, he had lost trust not just in people, but in the idea of justice itself. He used part of the settlement to move far away from Colorado, from Utah, from anything that reminded him of the past. He bought a quiet cabin near the Oregon coast, where he spent his mornings watching the fog roll in from the sea and his evenings reading old books by the fireplace. He rarely spoke to anyone and didn't give interviews, despite the dozens of requests. Filmmakers, podcast hosts, journalists, he turned them all away. He wasn't interested in fame or attention. He had lived in the spotlight once as a falsely accused killer. Now he wanted only silence. Still, Daniel couldn't stop the thoughts that came at night. The memories never faded. The sound of a cell door slamming shut. The taste of prison food. The way time slowed to a crawl in solitary confinement. But above all, what haunted him most wasn't the pain or the years lost. It was the face of Lily, her eyes as she walked across that sunny street in Los Angeles, holding the hand of a child, pretending to be someone else. She had lived freely while he had rotted in a cage. She had watched his life collapse from afar and chosen to remain silent. That betrayal was deeper than death, and it wasn't something forgiveness could fix. Some days, Daniel would sit outside his cabin and think about what could have been. A different life, a different decision, maybe even a second chance with someone who truly loved him. But those were only thoughts, echoes in the mind of a man who had learned that truth isn't always enough, and justice doesn't always arrive on time. His story ended not with revenge or redemption, but with quiet survival. And sometimes, that's all there is. A man wrongfully buried by a lie, walking free in a world that moved on without him, still carrying the weight of a name spoken. In whispers, Lily Monroe never died, but something inside Daniel did.